Hello and welcome to the classic Hollywood movie you should know. I'm your host Nate Washburn, and this week the movie is from 1951, A Place in the Sun, starring Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, and Shelley Winters, directed by George Stevens. Now, A Place in the Sun follows the story of George Eastman, played by Montgomery Clift. Clift is a poor relation of the Eastman, the ultra-wealthy Eastman family. He makes his way to California, where he gets a low-level job at the Eastman factory, and begins a relationship with co-worker Alice Tripp, played by Shelley Winters. Now, George, being an Eastman, he learns the ropes, he quickly gets these opportunities, and gets caught up in a whirlwind romance with the ultra-wealthy socialite Angela Vickers, played by Elizabeth Taylor. Now, the problem, it's a bit of a love triangle, because George, of course, has a relationship with Alice, and Alice is in a bit of a predicament when George begins his relationship with Angela. Now, the movie is actually based on a novel called An American Tragedy by Theodore Dreiser. Now, Dreiser wrote the book about an incident that happened in 1906, this sort of tragic love triangle that happened in upstate New York. Now, I find that, the title of A Place in the Sun is a bit misleading, because even when I was talking to my wife about watching it, she thought it was this, melodramatic romance. And it's really kind of a dark romance, because you don't quite know what is going to happen, what direction it's going to take. And there's so many scenes in it that are just really, really sort of, creepy and tough to watch. There's a scene when Alice goes to talk to the country doctor about her predicament to get some advice, and just the way that the doctor talks to her and the way that he refuses to give her options, it really makes you squirm. Now, the cast in A Place in the Sun is really fantastic. Montgomery Clift and Shelley Winters both got Oscar nominations for their performances, but the standout might be Elizabeth Taylor. This is her first dramatic role. She was a child star, came to prominence in a movie called National Velvet about a horse. She was in a Lassie movie. She made her way into light romantic comedies like Father of the Bride. And this was her first opportunity to a real juicy dramatic role, and she really takes advantage of it. And there are many scenes in it that she's brilliant, fantastic. I mean, the scene towards the end when she faints is like you hold your breath as she falls. It's unbelievably well done. Now, director George Stevens won Best Director for A Place in the Sun, and the way that he shoots this film, it is really quite interesting. He uses dissolves, so one scene will dissolve into the next scene, but he leaves that earlier scene on screen for a couple extra seconds, almost like there's this ghostly image that that gives you this feeling of discomfort. Stevens also uses some interesting camera angles and long takes. The scene where Alice tells George about her predicament, it's on his birthday. The whole scene, Stevens has his camera actually outside of the room, and as Alice is speaking, he doesn't cut, he doesn't give her any sort of coverage really. It's over her shoulder, and you see the whole room. It's almost like this full master shot as she talks about what is happening. And the scene where George has two phone calls, Stevens shoots it through a doorway and doesn't zoom in, doesn't get close, so it almost feels like when you're watching it that you're eavesdropping almost. It's slightly jarring. Now, the movie A Place in the Sun was filmed in late 1949, but it wasn't released until August of 1951 because Paramount held off. They knew they had a big Oscar contender in 1950 with Sunset Boulevard, and they figured A Place in the Sun would be an Oscar contender as well, so they held off, released it in 1951, and they were right. A Place in the Sun was nominated for 9 Oscars, and it won 6, including Best Costumes for Edith Head and that Best Director for George Stevens. Quick little side note, Edith Head, the dress that she designed for Elizabeth Taylor with all the flowers on the top, became like a fashion sensation. Like, people wanted to dress like the dress in A Place in the Sun, which is kind of funny. So if you're a fan of dark movies and movies about like the psychology of love and dark love triangles and whatnot, then check out A Place in the Sun from 1951. It is a great film. It's this week's classic Hollywood movie you should know. I'm your host, Nate Washburn. Keep watching.